I was doing a job I never got paid for, and I did IT better than anyone who ever held the title. The emails came late, the deadlines came earlier, my breaks shrunk, my responsibilities ballooned. But every time I questioned why my job felt so much heavier than everyone else's, I got the same answer from the one man who was supposed to guide me: "You're next in line. This is how leadership starts." And I believed him. God, I believed every single word because he said it like a secret, like a personal promise sealed between mentor and mentee. So I showed up early, I stayed late, I created team systems, handled conflicts, boosted numbers, and managed people I used to sit beside. But I was still earning the same paycheck, still clocking out with a title that no longer matched what I actually did. My name is Sasha Clark. I'm 30 years old, and this is the story of how my HR manager tricked me into doing the job he gave to someone else, and how I turned the entire office upside down to make sure they both regretted it. If you're tired of being walked on by people in power, subscribe and drop a comment if you've ever worked for a liar in a suit. This story might just give you the courage to fight back. At the beginning of that year, I was honestly hopeful. I'd been working at that software firm for over 4 years, and I'd slowly earned the respect of almost every team. The company was mid, sized big enough for promotions to matter, small enough that people noticed when someone stepped up. And over time, I had stepped up for everyone except myself. It was Daniel, the HR manager, who first told me I was being considered for a leadership position. I remember that moment like it was gift-wrapped. He leaned in during our one check-in and said, "We're eyeing you for the upcoming project lead role. It's not official yet, but your work ethic, it's exactly what we need." I felt my chest swell with something between pride and relief. It wasn't just about a pay raise, it was about finally being seen. After years of quietly overperforming, someone in power had finally said it. I was what they needed. I left his office that day walking taller. The weeks that followed became brutal in the name of preparation. Suddenly, Daniel and my direct supervisor were feeding me more responsibility. Think of it as leadership training, they'd say, and I bought that lie like it was gold. I took on team schedules, I reviewed reports, I mediated disputes. I got looped into meetings I never used to attend, and more than once. I was introduced as our future lead in front of senior staff. No promotion letter, no contract update. Just a whisper campaign of hope and flattery that kept me silent and grinding. There were moments, I'll admit, when the reality started to itch. The actual person in the lead role, Marcus, was leaving. He'd given notice, yet even as his departure approached, nothing concrete came my way. But every time I asked Daniel, he gave me the same smile. "Trust me, you're going to thank me later." So I kept going. I worked weekends, I improved team processes. I launched a small employee feedback survey that actually improved performance tracking across departments. People were sending me emails titled Manager Sasha, even though my email signature hadn't changed. I didn't know it yet, but behind the scenes, Daniel had already made another decision. He wasn't mentoring me into a role. He was using me to fill a gap while someone else waited for a red carpet entrance. And that someone was his girlfriend. Her name was Tiffany Monroe. I'd seen her around mostly in the break room with Daniel, sometimes at happy hours. She was newish, pretty, polished, but not particularly memorable in terms of work ethic. I don't say that to be petty. I say it because she was genuinely never assigned major projects, never part of the stressful team overhauls, and never once seen staying late when deadlines came crashing down. When Marcus officially left, I waited for my moment. I expected the HR announcement. I waited for Daniel's signature email blast, but nothing came. Instead, on Monday morning, Tiffany walked in wearing a tailored blazer and heels and was introduced in the team meeting as our new project lead. I think I went cold. I remember looking around the room, waiting for someone to correct the sentence. This had to be a mistake. She'd never even led a product review. How could she lead an entire department? But Daniel clapped first, loud and proud, and my stomach dropped. That day, something in me shifted. I still wore the same employee badge, but I didn't feel like an employee anymore. I felt like a target. They didn't just give someone else the job I'd bled, for they gave it to someone I'd watched laugh in Daniel's office like they were dating. Because they were. And I was the idiot who let myself be used like a stepping stool so she could rise. But I didn't scream, I didn't quit, because that would have made me easy to erase. Instead, I smiled, congratulated her, and started building something they couldn't stop my revenge. When Sasha walked out of that office with her smile still intact, no one knew the storm that had just been born inside her. Most people would have gone straight home, curled up on the couch, and cried themselves to sleep after watching months of loyalty flushed down the drain. But Sasha wasn't most people. She didn't even blink. Instead, she walked to her desk, fired up her laptop, and opened a fresh document. She titled it, Receipts Day 1. She wasn't going to yell. She wasn't going to beg. She was going to document every sly comment, every policy skipped, every shady lunch meeting. She wasn't just hurt, she was insulted. She gave everything to this company, and they paid her back with a slap to the face dressed as a business decision. And what made it worse? He didn't even try to hide it. As Sasha sipped her now cold coffee, she glanced across the floor. There he was, David Rollins, the HR manager, sitting in his glass office with a smug grin plastered across his face. And right beside him, pretending to shuffle papers like she wasn't just handed Sasha's role on a silver platter, was Melissa Crane, the new senior client lead, who had never once led anything except her manager into that back stairwell when they thought no one was watching. But Sasha had watched, and she had written it all down. Over the next few days, Sasha moved with a calm most people mistook for weakness. David thought she'd crumble. He thought by now she'd be sending in her resignation, letter maybe even begging him for a reference. But instead, Sasha did what she did best, observe, collect, and prepare. She noticed how Melissa skipped the mandatory 9A. M. sinks but marked herself present. She saw how David signed off on her inflated expense reports without blinking. One morning, Sasha overheard them laughing over cocktails from last night on the company's dime. It wasn't just unprofessional. It was a violation of everything their employee handbook stood for, and Sasha had a copy of that handbook saved. Page by page, by the end of the week, Sasha's document had grown to 17 pages, each line time-stamped, cross, referenced, and backed up. But she didn't just rely on her notes. She got clever. She started recording her screen during Zoom meetings. When Melissa presented a report Sasha herself had created 3 months ago Word. For Word, Sasha just smiled and clicked record. When David dismissed a junior staffer's harassment claim because the accused was a close friend, Sasha added it to her file. Then came the moment that made everything personal. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when Sasha was called into David's office. "I just wanted to check in," he said, tapping his pen against the desk with that same fake smile. "We know the last few weeks have been a transition, but I'm hoping you're not holding a grudge." Sasha just smiled. "Not at all. I'm just doing my job." David nodded. "Good, because you know, the last thing we'd want is someone creating friction on the team." That's when Sasha realized he knew she was watching, and he was trying to scare her into silence, but it had the opposite effect. When she left the office, she didn't go back to her desk. She went straight to it. "Hey, Ben," she said to the quiet guy who always wore anime hoodies and worked during lunch to avoid people. "Remember how you helped me recover that corrupted file last month?" "Yeah," Ben said, not even looking up. "I need help again. Just need to recover some emails, a few weeks' worth, all sent between David and Melissa." Ben finally looked up. "You got permission." Sasha slid a folded piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of the employee monitoring policy, specifically the clause that stated I.D. could access any emails if an employee raised suspicion of misconduct involving financial or ethical violations. "I'm officially raising suspicion," she said. Ben stared at her, then slowly nodded. "I'll need a day." By the time Sasha got those emails, she already knew what she was going to do, but first she had to play her last card. one she'd been saving. See, what David didn't know was that Sasha and Melissa went to college together. They weren't friends, far from it, but they had enough overlapping classes to share a few mutual connections. One of whom was now working at the company's parent firm in New York. That mattered because the firm had a strict policy against internal favoritism and sexual conflict of interest, and if it reached the wrong person at the top, it wouldn't just cost David his job, it would wreck his career. Sasha didn't need to yell. She didn't need to fight. She just had to send the right file to the right person at the right time, but she wasn't ready yet. First, she needed proof beyond doubt, not just gossip, not just observations. She needed hard, indisputable evidence. That weekend, Sasha stayed in, no parties, no distractions, just her laptop, a spreadsheet, and a folder of files named Closure. She built a timeline showing how her promised promotion disappeared the moment Melissa was hired. She highlighted emails between David and the hiring manager referencing fitting the role with someone who understands his rhythm. She even had a screenshot of David sending Melissa an emoji at midnight. By the time the document was done, it was 52 pages long, and at the end of it, Sasha added one sentence: "This is not a resignation letter. It's a request for accountability," because she wasn't leaving quietly. She wasn't crying. She was smiling and taking notes. The truth has a funny way of showing up when you're patient enough to stop chasing it. Sasha didn't have to search for her final piece of evidence. It landed right in her inbox like fate had hand-delivered it. It was a Thursday morning. Gray skies pressing against the office windows like the clouds knew something was brewing inside. Sasha was sitting quietly at her desk, going over her project notes, when a new email popped up on her screen. The subject line read, "Leadership Retreat, Finalized Guest List and Agenda." At first, she thought nothing of it. She wasn't part of the leadership team, at least not anymore, but then she noticed something strange. Her name was on the CC list. She clicked. It was an internal thread meant only for upper management, sent by the director of operations, who clearly didn't realize she had autofilled the wrong Sasha's email. And what Sasha read next didn't just give her chills, it gave her power. Attached to the email was a full itinerary for a private weekend retreat. 3 days at a luxury resort just outside the city, spa treatments, breakout sessions, team dinners, and a keynote address by who else? David Rollins. His name was plastered across the document in bold letters as the retreat's head facilitator, listed under Cultivating Workplace Trust. Sasha stared at the screen in disbelief, a bitter laugh rising in her throat. Workplace Trust. The man was dating his subordinate and faking expense reports to fund their wine nights, and now he was delivering the opening speech on ethics. But what made Sasha sit up, what made her freeze in her chair with her hands hovering over the keyboard, was the guest list. Because sitting third from the top, right under the executive director, was the name, Melissa Crane title, Senior Client Lead Status, confirmed she wasn't just attending, she was being celebrated, and suddenly everything clicked. This retreat wasn't just a retreat, it was a grooming ground, a place where David could present Melissa as a rising star to upper management, impressing the board with her potential so they'd endorse her for more authority. The promotion Sasha was supposed to get wasn't the only thing he gave Melissa. He was building her a ladder made of lies, step by step. But now Sasha had something he hadn't planned for, a key to the room. She wasn't supposed to be on that thread. She wasn't supposed to see those attachments. But she had, and that meant she knew exactly where they'd be, when they'd be there, and what they were planning to say. All she had to do now was make sure someone else saw what she saw. That night, Sasha didn't go home. She stayed in the office after hours, the fluorescent lights buzzing above her like witnesses to her plan. She printed the entire retreat agenda, highlighted Melissa's name in neon yellow, and wrote a post-it on top that simply said, "Unauthorized attendee, conflict of interest, HR Code Violation 7, 3, 2. Then she attached her 52-page document, the one she'd been building in silence for weeks. She dropped the sealed envelope into the mail slot for Janet Collins, the company's chief integrity officer, whose office was on the executive floor and rarely visited by employees below management. Sasha had never even met her. But she knew Janet's reputation: strict, observant, and absolutely ruthless when it came to ethics. And Sasha wasn't finished. The next morning, she scheduled a delayed send email to go out to Janet's inbox at exactly 8:00 a.m., 30 minutes before the retreat began. The subject line, urgent, discreet inquiry regarding conflict of interest at leadership retreat. In the email, Sasha wrote in calm, surgical language. She didn't accuse, she didn't rant. She simply attached a summary of everything she had documented, noted the specific HR policy violations, included timestamps, screenshots, and names, and then said, "If this information is correct, I respectfully request a formal review of all leadership promotions and approvals made by Mr. David Rollins in the last 6 months." She ended the email with a line that would later be quoted back to her in a board meeting. "Silence in the face of unethical behavior isn't professionalism, it's participation." And then she hit send later. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The leadership retreat kicked off at 9:00 a.m. sharp, champagne toasts, welcome packets, and a PowerPoint presentation titled Leading with Integrity. David was in his prime, pacing the front of the room, blazer sharp, smile sharper. And Melissa, she sat front row, wearing a branded lanyard she hadn't earned, taking notes like she wasn't the secret in the room no one had uncovered yet, until Sasha's email was opened at 8:13 a.m. Janet Collins clicked on Sasha's email from her office in headquarters. At 8:29, she forwarded it to legal. By 9:05, she was on the phone with the COO. At 10:12 a.m., a call was placed to the resort, and by 11:47 a.m., 2 company cars pulled into the gravel lot outside the conference hall, carrying Janet, a compliance officer, and a member of the legal department. Inside, the mood shifted. David's voice cracked as he tried to maintain control. Melissa's smile vanished, and within an hour, they were both quietly pulled aside and asked to leave the event without explanation. Meanwhile, back at HQ, Sasha arrived at her desk and calmly sipped her coffee. She didn't gloat. She didn't post. She just opened her laptop and began typing a follow-up email because she wasn't done yet. David thought the retreat would be the peak of his career. He had no idea it would be the beginning of his collapse. Sasha didn't go to work the next morning expecting celebration. She wasn't looking for a thank you or even an acknowledgement. She knew how these things worked. Corporations didn't clap for you when you exposed rot in their walls. They called in contractors and painted over the cracks like nothing happened. But she wasn't there for applause. She was there to finish what she'd started, and the universe, or maybe just karma, handed her exactly what she needed. That Thursday afternoon, while Sasha was reviewing contracts at her desk, her Slack pinged with a message from someone unexpected. "Hey, you don't know me, but I used to work under David. Can we talk?" It was from Cara Dean, a name Sasha barely remembered only from old project folders and a staff list that hadn't been updated since last spring. Cara had left the company about 8 months ago. No public farewell, no LinkedIn post, just gone. But something about the timing made Sasha freeze. She messaged back, "Of course, Zoom or coffee offsite, tomorrow." They met at a quiet cafe just outside downtown, tucked between a bookstore and a law office. Cara looked nothing like Sasha expected. Younger, maybe mid-20s, with quiet eyes and fingers that fidgeted constantly with her cup sleeve, but her voice was steady, sharp, and what she shared made Sasha's stomach turn. "He did the same thing to me," Cara said flatly. Sasha blinked. "What do you mean?" "Promised me a leadership track, gave me the biggest account we'd ever had, told me to stay late, take initiative, keep my head down. I worked every weekend for 4 months straight. I didn't complain once." Sasha already knew where this was going. Then, right before review season, he pulls me into a meeting and says they're going with someone more client-friendly. That someone turned out to be Melissa. Sasha's breath caught. "And you left?" "I didn't leave," Cara said. "I was pushed. After I questioned him about it, I started getting cold-shouldered. Then came the bad performance reviews, claims I was aggressive in meetings, that I made clients uncomfortable." She looked up at Sasha with tired eyes. "I thought I was crazy, until I saw your name in the news." Cara pulled out her phone and showed Sasha a small headline from a local business blog. HR manager placed on leave amid allegations of favoritism and conflict of interest. The article didn't name Sasha directly, but the story was unmistakably hers. Sasha exhaled, then leaned forward. "Did you keep any of it? Emails, messages?" Kara's lips curled in a quiet, dangerous smile. "Oh, I kept everything." She pulled out a USB drive. "I've been sitting on this for months, debating what to do with it. But after what he did to you, and how he tried to disappear me, I'm not staying quiet anymore." Sasha took the drive in her hands. It was small. Ordinary, but what it held was explosive. That night, she stayed up until nearly 3 a.m., going through it all. Emails, meeting recordings, voice memos, even a few screen captures from Slack. And what she found was worse than she imagined. David had a pattern. He didn't just pick Melissa. He had a trail of young women he mentored, strung along with career promises, then discarded when they started asking questions. He'd left a digital blood trail, and Kara had mapped it in chilling detail. There were messages that read, "You're smart, but sometimes your tone comes off too sharp. You should smile more in meetings. Leadership loves a quiet executor. Let me do the talking for now. Your time will come. Don't worry about the others. You're my pick. Just stay low and it's yours." And then, without warning, total silence, ghosting, cold reviews, isolating feedback. It was textbook manipulation. Worse, it had happened before Melissa, and no one had stopped him until now. The next morning, Sasha took the USB and wrote a formal report to Janet Collins, the Chief Integrity Officer. This time, she didn't ask for a review. She demanded an internal investigation into every promotion David had overseen in the last 24 months. She also attached Kara's resignation letter, where she'd cited unethical leadership practices, and received no reply. Before sending the report, Sasha wrote one final sentence: "The silence around David Rawlins has been built by fear, but I no longer have any." And then she hit send. By Monday, HR sent a company-wide email. "We have opened a full inquiry into leadership conduct within the Client Success Division. Employees with relevant information will be contacted privately." David wasn't just placed on leave now. He was being audited, his approval powers suspended, his Slack account frozen, his assistant reassigned, and the best part, Melissa's promotion offer was officially revoked. Her name removed from internal systems, her title reset to associate. The retreat had been the peak of her climb, and now the rope had been cut. But Sasha wasn't done yet. She asked Kara if she'd be willing to give a statement to the Ethics Committee anonymous, if necessary. Kara said yes. So did another former coworker Kara referred, and another. A quiet network of women who had all suffered in silence was now cracking through the corporate walls, one voice at a time. It was no longer just Sasha's story. It was a reckoning, and as she sat in her apartment that night, rereading her report and watching her inbox for the next shoe to drop, she felt something she hadn't in months, steady. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't confused. She was clear. David had underestimated the wrong woman. He thought she was just another stepping stone, but she had become the ground that would collapse everything under him. The moment Sasha closed her laptop that night, she knew there was no going back. She had handed over the USB. She had detailed the emotional manipulation. She had drawn the company's attention to a festering rot in their leadership chain. But if she knew anything about big corporations, it was this: they could be just as cowardly as the people they protected. So no, Sasha wasn't going to sit around and hope someone in a high-rise conference room decided to do the right thing. She was going to make sure the truth reached everyone, because nothing kills silence faster than a timeline. She started her war with what no one could deny: receipts. Over the course of 4 sleepless nights, Sasha pulled every piece of digital truth she could find and organized it into a story that even the company couldn't spin their way out of. But this wasn't a rant. It wasn't an angry blog post. It was something sharper, more surgical. She built a document, a private, perfectly formatted PDF titled "Abuse of Power: A Timeline of Lies and Promotion Fraud by David Rawlins." Each page was marked with dates, Slack screenshots, promotional announcements, performance review comparisons, and most damning of all, back screenshots of 2 email chains. The first showed David telling Sasha that the promotion was definitely hers. In January, with detailed KPI she'd already surpassed, the second showed him emailing Melissa just 1 week later, saying she was the top candidate and he was pushing for a surprise announcement at the retreat. Each email had its header, timestamp, and metadata. Sasha made sure of it. She even included a section with redacted statements from former employees like Kara outlining the same manipulative pattern, worked late nights under false promises, gaslit into staying quiet, told to be patient while someone else got my spot. Then came the final page, her ace. Company culture matters, but only when we stop enabling the people who poison it. Beneath that, Sasha included one chilling sentence. Ask yourself, is this the leadership we want shaping the next generation of women at our company? She didn't post it on social media. She didn't send it to a gossip blog that would be easy to dismiss. Instead, she sent it to every department head, every woman on staff, every diversity and inclusion lead, and with a deep breath to the entire company. Wide mailing list. The subject line was clean, bold, you deserve to know who's leading you. It was 7:58 a.m. when she hit send. By 8:09 a.m., the entire building buzzed with it, the sound of keyboards typing, phones vibrating. Doors that were halfway open now slammed shut, coffee mugs left untouched mid-sip, employees from marketing, finance, product, sales all reading the same document on their screens with widened eyes and dropped jaws. One guy from analytics literally stood up and said out loud, "Yo, David's done." By 8:14 a.m., Melissa stormed out of her shared cubicle space, face pale, clutching her phone like it might disappear. She made a beeline for the hallway, but not before someone whispered, "So, was the retreat your reward?" By 8:22 a.m., Sasha was called into legal's office. They sat her down like she was on trial. But she wasn't flinching. "Do you understand what you've done?" one of the lawyers asked. Sasha folded her hands calmly. "I shared internal communications and verifiable performance comparisons. Nothing proprietary, nothing outside company systems, just the truth. You sent this to over 200 employees because 200 employees deserve better leadership than a man who abuses his role for personal relationships." Another lawyer rubbed his temple. This could have been handled privately. "It was multiple times with no result. I used the same channels you asked me to, and I was silenced, so I used the only one that couldn't be shut down. They dismissed her without punishment because deep down, they knew she'd box them in. Any formal retaliation would spark a PR fire they weren't prepared for, so they played damage control, but it was too late. The damage was already viral. Internally, by noon, David's name was trending on Slack threads. Not in hashtags, in reaction emojis. People were screenshotting his old leadership memos and reacting with clown faces, red flags, broken hearts. Others were resharing Sasha's document in private teams, groups with messages like, "So this is why half our team quit last year." Glad someone finally said it. She did what HR should have done a year ago. By 2:00 p.m., Sasha's inbox was flooded with over 60 replies, some from former interns, others from current employees, a few from directors she'd never even met. But the most powerful one came from a woman in her mid-40s who'd been with the company since it launched. "I watched this culture eat women alive for a decade. I thought speaking up would cost me my job, but after today, I finally feel like it might cost them theirs." That night, the executive board released a statement. "We are conducting a formal external investigation into all promotion-related decisions overseen by Mr. Rollins. We acknowledge the courage of the individuals who brought these matters to light." It was the corporate version of a confession. David's photo disappeared from the company leadership page. Melissa's profile was changed to on leave, and Sasha, she went home that night, not as an employee, but as a woman who had dragged the truth out of shadows and into the daylight. But what she didn't know was that her story had already spread beyond the company, because someone, one of the 200 who got her email, had forwarded it to a tech journalist, and that journalist, they had questions. You can be offered the world, but how you accept it is what makes you unforgettable. The promotion came on a Tuesday. The same conference room where I'd once been humiliated behind closed doors now stood open to me, sunlight flooding in through the glass. HR now cleaned out and restructured emailed me a formal offer letter with new benefits, my name on the door, and a salary that, not long ago, would have seemed like a fantasy, but I wasn't going to click accept like everyone else. Because this wasn't just a win. This was the moment I had been walking toward since the day Craig Mallory smirked at me across that meeting table, since Megan sauntered past my desk with that smug smile and that fake title. This wasn't just about taking my seat at the table. This was about flipping the table over and letting everyone see what real power looks like when it's been earned the hard way, and I was going to make sure no one in that office ever forgot it. I didn't click the email, not right away. Instead, I crafted a plan, the kind of quiet chaos that leaves a mark long after the dust settles. First, I called the new HR interim director, a woman named Tasha who'd been working under Craig for years but never had the freedom to lead. She was smart, sharp, and had seen everything. I told her I wanted to make my acceptance public, not for vanity, not for revenge, but for clarity, for the women watching, for the interns silently taking notes. For every tired employee who was told to be patient, while mediocrity soared past them. She paused, then said, "You want to make an example of them?" "No," I replied, "I want to make an example of me." We scheduled a staff-wide town hall for Friday at 10 a.m. Mandatory attendance, subject, departmental changes and promotions. They thought it would be routine, another boring shuffle at the top, but they had no idea what was coming. When I walked into that conference room on Friday morning, the air was buzzing. People whispered, phones were out. Every employee in my division was seated, even a few from marketing and legal had come to peek in. Megan's desk sat empty. Craig's office was still locked. I wore a deep red blazer, bold, clean, confident. My hair was tied up, my laptop under my arm, no notes, no fear. At exactly 10:00 a.m., I stepped onto the small stage and took the mic. "Good morning," I said, scanning the room. "I'm Rachel Dunn, and today I'd like to introduce you to the new Director of Operations and Ethics." A few people looked at each other. Some started to clap, but I held up a hand. "Not yet," I said with a soft smile. "You haven't heard the story." And then I told them, not in whispers, not in legal code. I told them how a promotion had been dangled in front of me like a carrot, how I was strung along for months by a man who was sleeping with the very person he gave my job to. I explained how emails were manipulated, how meetings were faked, how I was told to stay in my lane. I showed slides. I played Craig's voice recording. I didn't hide the names. They were already gone, fired with cause. I spoke clearly, directly, and without shame. And then I showed them one last thing. A photo of every woman who had come to me privately in the weeks after I exposed him, some from accounting, some from IT, some from departments I'd never even worked in, all with similar stories. All with names, dates, proof. I didn't tell their stories, not yet, but I showed the photo to make one thing clear. This isn't about one woman being wronged. I said, this is about all of us knowing what it means to be undervalued in silence, and then deciding not to be silent anymore. The room was dead silent. Even the guy from finance who never looked up from his laptop was staring at me, mouth slightly open. I took a deep breath and continued. When I was offered this role, the one I earned months ago, I could have accepted quietly. I could have signed the letter, popped champagne at home, and started fresh, but I realized that would have made me just like them. I clicked to the final slide, my formal acceptance letter. But I'd added one sentence at the bottom. I accept this position not in secret, but in truth, and I dedicate this seat at the table to every person who was ever told to wait their turn while someone else cut the line. The room exploded. Applause, cheering. People stood up, some even cried. Tasha from HR wiped her eyes behind her glasses. A junior developer I barely knew whispered, finally. I had just done what no one expected, not just taken my win, but shared it. In the days that followed, the office changed, the energy, the mood, even the language. People spoke up more, meetings became sharper. Accountability actually meant something. Employees who'd felt small now felt seen. They weren't scared of losing their job for telling the truth, because someone had already done it and won. And on Monday morning, When I walked into my new office, the one with the view, and the quiet, I didn't sit down right away. I walked to the window, took a deep breath, and I smiled because they thought they could break me. They thought they could take what I earned and hand it to someone else behind closed doors, but I didn't knock. I kicked the door open, and I gave them a show they'd never forget.